Today is February 24th, 2026.
A heavy date.
It is. We are marking exactly 4 years. 4 full years since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
4 years of unprovoked aggression.
And usually when we start these deep dives, we look for a hook,
Yeah.
surprising statistic or some historical anecdote to grab your attention.
But we aren't doing that today.
No. Today requires us to just look at the calendar and then look out the window at the reality of the world. Because if you rewind the clock, if you go back to this exact morning 4 years ago, the world was being sold a completely different story.
It was a completely different universe of rhetoric.
Right.
If you were watching Russian state television on the morning of February 24, 2022, you weren't hearing about a long war. You weren't hearing about attrition or mobilization.
You were being promised a blitzkrieg.
Like a parade.
Literally a parade.
They had the dress uniforms packed in the trucks. They had restaurant reservations made in Kyiv.
Minimal losses.
Yeah.
No strikes on cities. The state collapsing in days. That was the promise.
And the contrast between that promise and the reality of today is staggering.
So our mission today is very specific.
Yeah.
We are not analyzing troop movements on a map in Chasiv Yar. We are looking at the fluctuating price of oil. We are doing an autopsy.
An autopsy of the lie.
Exactly. We are analyzing the architecture of the lie. And to do that, we are using the work of Denis Kazansky.
The Ukrainian blogger and journalist.
Right. Now, for those who don't follow Ukrainian media closely, Kazansky is vital context here. He is a native of Donbas.
He's from Donetsk.
Yes, so he saw the very beginning of this in 2014. He had to flee his home then because of the initial occupation.
So when he watches Russian propaganda claiming to, quote-unquote, protect the people of Donbas, it isn't abstract for him. It's his streets they are talking about.
And he's done something that I think a lot of us avoid doing because it's genuinely painful to look back at. He went back to the tapes.
He pulled the archival footage.
The video he put together is a chronological record. He collected the predictions, the promises, the incredibly confident assertions made by the experts and the generals on February 24th, 2022.
And we are going to stack those tapes against the reality of today, February 24th, 2026.
We're calling this structure the lie stack.
And I want to be clear for the listener, this isn't just to point and say they were wrong. Everyone makes incorrect predictions sometimes.
Hindsight is 20/20, right?
Right. If this were just an error in judgment, it wouldn't warrant a deep dive. This is about systemic deception.
We are going to lean briefly on our previous deep dive framework, the mafia state analysis.
Because we need to explain why this happens, why these specific lies were told, and more importantly, why the people who told them are still sitting in comfortable television studios in Moscow today.
The lack of accountability is the tell. But let's open the file. Let's go to the first layer of the lie stack, the myth of the blitzkrieg.
This is foundational. If you look at the video Kazansky put together, the vibe in the studio it's electric. It's arrogant.
It's not the somber tone of a nation going to war.
No, it's the tone of a nation going to a victory party.
There's a specific clip from the early hours. A Russian official is looking at the camera with this smirk. You can see it in his eyes.
Yeah.
They said, and I quote, "The special military operation is going strictly according to plan. All tasks are being solved successfully."
Strictly according to plan.
They said the timeline was days. Denis Pushilin explicitly stated that.
Let's remind the listener who Pushilin is. He is the head of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, the puppet governor installed by Moscow.
Right, and on that day, he looks into the camera, wearing a suit, looking very official, and he states their forces would reach the administrative borders of Donetsk and Luhansk in a matter of days.
He stated it as a fact. A weather report. It will rain tomorrow, and we will be at the border in a few days.
4 years later. Let's look at the reality. Did they reach the borders?
No. 4 years later, the Russian army is still smashing its head against towns like Chasiv Yar.
The days became years.
The plan is non-existent. The strictly according to plan narrative has morphed into a perpetual grinding slaughter.
So they said it was a matter of days. 4 years later, what is the plan? What fell?
Nothing but ruins.
And here's the structural question we have to keep asking. Accountability. In any normal system, if you predict a 3-day timeline and deliver a 4-year catastrophe, who is held accountable?
None. Absolutely no one. Pushilin is still the head of the occupation authority. The experts are still on air.
Let's move to the second lie in the stack. Because if the timeline lie was bad, the next one just defies physical reality. Total air superiority.
This narrative dropped instantaneously within hours of the first missiles hitting.
Kazansky pulls up the clips of the official spokesman for the Russian Ministry of Defense, Konashenkov,
The face of the invasion.
and he also highlights a military expert named Vladislav Shurigin. Shurigin is supposed to be the independent analyst. He's in a suit. He's there to validate the military's claims to the public.
A validator.
So they said, Shurigin sits there calmly and says, the aviation of the armed forces of Ukraine is destroyed.
He claimed air defense is suppressed.
He claimed 90% of airfields are out of action.
Let's pause on that number. 90%.
It sounds incredibly thorough.
It implies total dominance. It means the war is effectively over because Ukraine has no eyes and no wings.
4 years later, what is the reality?
4 years later, Ukraine is still flying. Ukraine is still striking back.
Thousands of Russian missiles and drones later, the destroyed Air Force is still fighting. They're hitting bases hundreds of kilometers inside Russia.
You cannot destroy a destroyed object. If Shurigin was right in 2022, what have they been bombing for the last 4 years?
Exactly. So they said the aviation was destroyed. 4 years later, we see Ukrainian jets in the sky. Accountability.
None. Vladislav Shurigin was not fired. He was not demoted.
He is still a respected military expert on state TV.
He sits in the same chair giving new analysis, completely ignoring that he said the war was already won 4 years ago.
It's a staggering level of delusion. But let's go deeper into the lie stack. Because counting planes is technical. The next layer is psychological. It's the moral collapse theory.
This is where overconfidence turns into complete fantasy.
Lie number 3, the mass surrender.
Right.
In the video, we see Russian intelligence and media claiming Ukrainian troops were deserting en masse. But the language they use is what's fascinating.
They claimed Ukrainians left positions due to, quote, moral ethical norms.
Moral ethical norms.
That was their code. The narrative wasn't just that the Ukrainians were scared of Russian tanks. The narrative was that their moral compass prevented them from fighting Russians.
They convinced themselves that the Ukrainians were secretly waiting to be saved.
That they would drop their guns and welcome the occupation with flowers.
They said the resistance would melt away. 4 years later, what is the reality?
The resistance is fierce and unbroken. 4 years of the most intense war in Europe since 1945.
Ukrainians are not surrendering due to moral norms. They are fighting for their survival.
This highlights the absolute delusion of the Russian leadership. They believed their own propaganda.
This is the global Debaltsev prediction, isn't it?
Exactly. For the listener who isn't familiar, Debaltsev was a battle in 2015, a tactical defeat for Ukraine where they had to withdraw under heavy fire.
A localized encirclement.
Right. Russian intelligence looked at that one battle from 2015 and extrapolated it to the entire country in 2022. They convinced Putin that the entire Ukrainian armed forces would just collapse the exact same way.
They thought the whole country was a fragile house of cards.
And because of that lie, because of that corrupt data, they sent riot police into a war zone. They sent guys with batons and shields driving into Kyiv in unarmored trucks.
Because they expected to manage a crowd, not fight a war.
And they were decimated.
So they said the military would surrender. 4 years later, the war grinds on. Accountability.
None. The intelligence officers who fed Putin this data were not court-martialed. They kept their jobs.
Which perfectly transitions to lie number 4. The strategic delusion. Geopolitical abandonment.
They needed to isolate Ukraine psychologically, make them feel hopeless.
Kazansky highlights a quote from Bogdan Bispalko,
He's a member of the President's Council on Interethnic Relations.
a man with direct access. Bispalko said the U.S. has effectively agreed with Russia. He claimed Ukraine is just being given away.
He explicitly promised we will not introduce harsh sanctions.
4 years later.
Russia is the most sanctioned nation on earth. The West did not abandon Ukraine.
The war continues. They said the West would fold. 4 years later, the coalition holds. Accountability for Bispalko.
None. He was not fired for incompetence. He continues to advise the president.
This is where we need to bring in our previous deep dive framework, the mafia state.
Yes.
In a normal country, an intelligence chief who predicts a 3-day war that lasts 4 years is fired or prosecuted for negligence. Why not in Russia?
Because Russia acts as a mafia state. The institutions are decorative. The title of military expert or intelligence chief, it's a costume.
Procedural theater.
Exactly. The currency in this system is not truth. It is loyalty. Loyalty over law.
Admitting the mistake means admitting the leader failed.
And the system cannot allow the leader to fail. So the lie must be sustained forever. Impunity acts as permission. When a war begins with lies, it must be sustained with lies.
Let's look at what that impunity enables on the ground, the reality of the destruction. because this next layer of the stack is where the blood is.
War crimes, barbarism, sadism.
Line number 5, we don't strike cities.
The Ministry of Defense explicitly stated this on day one. Quote, "The Russian armed forces do not launch strikes on the cities of Ukraine."
They said they do not strike cities. 4 years later, what do we see?
We see the victims, Ukrainians, civilians, residents of Mariupol, Bakhmut, of Avdiivka, Vovchansk.
We see carpet bombing, artillery barrages, mass shelling, the complete erasure of urban centers.
It is the liberation paradox. Russia claimed to be preventing a humanitarian catastrophe in Donbas.
That was the excuse.
And instead, they created a moonscape. Cities that lived peacefully before 2022 are now uninhabitable ruins.
Kazansky points out a specific, incredibly cynical example from the 2022 tapes, the Azovstal factories in Mariupol.
The propaganda in 2022 claimed that Ukrainian forces were going to blow up the factories and cause an ecological disaster.
They framed it as an environmental threat they had to prevent.
And the reality, Russia simply destroyed the factories and the city themselves. They dropped bunker-busting bombs on it. The concern for the environment was a complete fabrication.
Projection.
Pure projection.
Now, I want to pull us into the present moment. Because the propaganda machine didn't shut down when the blitzkrieg failed, it adapted.
It escalated.
Right. Let's look at the contemporary propaganda. Today, February 24th, 2026. Russian officials are currently claiming that France and the United Kingdom are secretly transferring a nuclear bomb to Ukraine.
The nuclear fairy tale.
Yes. Frame this for us. Why this lie? Why now? What is the logic here?
It is distraction logic, deflection, information warfare.
The double principle.
All according to Goebbels' principle. They do everything possible so people in the West zoom out from the barbarism and the sadism on the ground and start discussing nuclear fairy tales instead.
They want the conversation to be about nuclear escalation rather than Russian aggression.
Exactly. Why now? Why nuclear panic? Because you have to ask yourself what they're trying to make you stop looking at.
They want you to stop looking at their war.
Their crimes.
Their failure.
It is designed to induce fear and paralysis in the West. If you are terrified of a nuclear apocalypse, maybe you stop sending air defense to protect Ukrainian civilians.
It's a psychological operation.
100%.
We're going to take a brief pause, but when we come back, we're going to dive into the hypocrisy of the criminal battalions and the final verdict on the so-called peacekeeping mission.
And we have a specific recommendation from Kazansky to share.
Stay with us. Welcome back to our deep dive into the 4-year anniversary of the unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. We are dissecting the tapes from February 24, 2022, using the work of Denis Kazansky.
And before we get to the next lie in the stack, Kazansky recommends a book that we need to mention.
Yes. It's called The Melchior Elephant, or A Man Who Thought, by Stanislav Asayev.
Asayev is a fellow Donbas native, a writer and journalist.
He stayed in Donetsk after the initial occupation in 2014. He stayed there and wrote the truth about what was happening.
And for that, he was imprisoned. He was tortured in the Izolyatsiya camp for years.
Kazansky draws a brilliant, sickening contrast here. Asayev wrote the truth and went to prison. The Russian propagandists on state TV wrote lies and got rich.
We will have the link to order the book in the description right alongside the address for Kazansky's channel. It's essential reading.
Absolutely. Now back to the lie stack, part 4. The hypocrisy of methods.
This one is incredibly dark.
Lie number 6. The criminal battalions.
Let's go back to the tapes. 2022, Russian television, specifically the NTV channel, was broadcasting pure, unadulterated horror.
What were they horrified by?
They were claiming that Ukraine might release prisoners to fight in the defense of their cities. They called it creating chaos. They called it arming criminals.
They framed it as a collapse of morality.
Yes. They acted as though this was the ultimate red line of a civilized state.
So they said arming criminals is barbaric. 4 years later, what did Russia do?
Russia systematically emptied its own prisons.
They recruited rapists, murderers,
cannibals, literally violent criminals serving life sentences. They formed the Stormzy and Wagner units entirely from convicts.
They didn't just arm a few criminals, they industrialized it.
They used them as the primary assault force for months.
So Kazansky asked the rhetorical question, where is the moral outrage on NTV now?
And the answer is silence.
Total silence.
Yeah.
Accountability, none.
Because the goal was never order. The goal was never morality. The goal was conquest at any cost.
If they have to empty maximum security prisons to take a village, they will do it.
It proves that the outrage in 2022 was purely decorative, language replacing reality.
Which brings us to the final escalation. Truth versus control.
The core justification for the entire invasion.
Lie number 7. The peacekeeping myth.
They said the invasion was to stop the war, to ensure peace and stability on the land of Donbas.
Ensure peace and stability. 4 years later, what is the reality in Donbas?
Donbas is the most dangerous place on Earth.
The male population of the occupied territories has been completely decimated by forced mobilization.
They used the men of Donbas as cannon fodder to find Ukrainian artillery positions.
And the Russian speakers, the people they came to protect?
Killed by the thousands by Russian artillery.
So the conclusion on this protection...
Russia did not protect Donbas. It consumed it.
I want to use repetition here as a structural weapon to really hammer this home. We have to look at the contrast.
Let's do it.
If everything they said on state TV was true, why the lies?
Right.
If it was liberation, why erase the cities?
If it was peacekeeping, why 4 years of brutal war?
If it was minimal losses, why the absolute silence on casualties?
Because it was never about the truth.
It was about control.
When a system functions as a mafia state, the truth is just whatever the boss needs it to be on any given day.
So we arrive at the verdict. 4 years of war.
The verdict is strategic defeat.
They plan to parade in Kyiv in 3 days. 4 years later, they are celebrating the capture of a basement in a ruined village.
It is a devastating self-inflicted wound. But it is a wound that is bleeding out over Ukraine.
Normal diplomacy assumes that law matters. It assumes that state actors operate with some connection to objective reality.
But our analysis shows that a mafia system uses law as a costume.
Appeasement is read as permission.
The lies of 2022 were made possible because the world swallowed the lies of 2014.
That is the terrifying lesson here. Unity, deterrence, and accountability are the only language a system like this understands.
Truth is the only weapon that works against a system built entirely on lies.
You cannot negotiate with a lie stack. You have to dismantle it.
You have to face it without blinking.
So we ask you, the listener, to do exactly that. Do not look away.
Share this deep dive.
We need you to spread this. Go to the description. Watch Denis Kazansky's video. The link is right there.
Look at the faces of the people who promised a 3-day parade.
Link to his channel. Subscribe to it.
And read Stanislav Asiev's book.
We have also included links to our 2 related deep dives on the mafia state structure if you want to understand the framework better.
Do not let them replace reality.
We will see you next time.